Today's AskReddit post. What is the most horrific thing that someone has told you super casually? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. I called my cousin and at the beginning of the convo I asked what she was doing. She said, "Oh, just standing at the counter looking at my hand." I thought it was a little weird, but my cousin is a little weird, so I forgot about it. Anyway, half an hour later she goes, "The blood has now stained my shirt. I think I should hang up and go to the air." I was like, "What?" So she replied, "Oh, I stabbed myself with the meat cleaver 10 minutes before you called and the knife is still in my hand. I'm fine, but my shirt is now ruined." Shock is a hell of a drug. I cracked my skull open and lost like 2-3 pints when a fellow scout threw a tree at my head, don't ask. And all I felt was sudden wetness, and I'm like, yeah, I should probably tell an adult. Hug. Bruh, you can't hit us with the don't ask after that setup. He can't tell. A couple of years ago I was on one of those music festival cruises. I was sitting down waiting on my friends to finish their drinks and whatnot when this lady sits down next to me. Somehow we get to talking about dogs. I tell her about mine. She tells me that hers is a comfort dog. I didn't ask her to elaborate because it wasn't any of my business. But she tells me it's because she didn't leave her house for 5 years. Again, I didn't ask why. She went on to tell me, a perfect stranger who'd been talking to her for all of 5 minutes, that her ex-boyfriend was stalking her and broke into her house, so she had to shoot him and kill him. I think people overshare with strangers specifically because they know they'll probably never see you again. I've let really deeply personal things slip in front of strangers, not anywhere close to the scale of things in this thread, and then afterward wondered why I did. I think it's a way to help come to terms with trauma. Super ducked up if you're the listener though. Kinda surprised. When I talk to strangers I have a different name. Go to university. Only have 2 siblings. And then practice my lying skills for the duration of the conversation. I don't want anyone to think I have any issues. Ironically, you just told a kind of ducked up thing to a bunch of strangers. No, he was just practicing his lying. Supervisor at work. Dwayne had his baby yesterday. Me, oh great. Boy or girl? Supervisor dead. And X200B. Like WTF. Really? Poor guy and his wife had a stillborn. Hahaha, holy shit, that's terrible. This is the kind of sentence born from laughing at your mate's joke and getting kicked in the shin by the so halfway through. My therapist told me how she ran 2 people over, killing one and paralyzing the other, during our first meeting. LOL, do they think doctor-patient confidentiality works both ways? There's a scene in 30 Rock about this where Dr. Spaceman says this exact thing and then reveals something horrible that he did. It's been a while and I don't remember the details. Liz, I believe doctor-patient confidentiality is a 2-way street. I'm cheating on my wife. We all see the black kid in the corner, right? That he was going to prison for burning down a church. I had seen this guy about 10 times since the supposed accident. We were all hanging out and he said, "Guess what?" and that was that. Edit. This happened in South Texas for anyone wondering. Edit. And I'll add that he tried to gouge his girlfriend's eyes out, burned down her house and killed her 2 dogs. This guy had never raised his voice once. This was seriously out of left field. Edit. Goddamn guys. I never realized how miniature chasness there were. This man really said guess what to let you know he was going to prison for arson. Face rolling on the floor laughing. Face rolling on the floor laughing. Chicken butt. Haha, no, I'm playing. I just burned down a church. I'll see you in a hot minute. I was joking with an acquaintance once and he told me that he was going to move in a couple of months. We weren't really close enough for me to care, but I asked him why out of pure curiosity. In the same breath, without hesitation, he told me that he had been in the foster system all his life despite knowing his biological dad personally. His dad was some big businessman in New York City and didn't have the time to raise a son. He had been with 11 different families in 15 years and in each one he prayed he'd get adopted. It never happened. The family that he was with at that moment told him they were thinking about adopting him but changed their minds last minute. Now he's in a constant state of expecting to move because he just assumes that no one will ever want to adopt him. If you're reading this, I hope you're doing good, Michael. A relative told me about killing man who was attempting to rape him in the back of a truck once casually over drinks. Edit because English is confusing. The rape did not occur casually over drinks. The conversation did. To be fair, that's a pretty good reason to kill someone. Too bad about the psychological repercussions. Edit. Jesus. I am not saying it would have been better if he was raped. I am saying that for some people it is not a win-lose situation. It's just surviving, and I hope they get all the help they need. I'd rather have PTSD from one over the other. I understand what you mean. I do hope they got help to work things out. Lawyer here. I was representing a teenage boy charged with molesting a younger relative. His mother told me, "What's the big deal? I was molested as a kid and it didn't hurt me." Rule number 1. If you think abuse is okay because you turned out okay, you're not okay. Right? Like, yeah, you're okay now, but you were ducking terrified as a kid. The duck? That isn't an excuse for someone's actions. That's like a Marine saying, "What's the big deal? I was shot and I turned out okay," when a kid shoots up a school. The duck man. They may take okay to be whatever their measure of being successful in life is, but it remains that still advocating violence against children. When I was in college, there was this guy who would hang around me sometimes that seemed just a little bit off. But he was nice and we both had similar interests, so we hung out. One day, after I hadn't seen him for weeks, he tells me it's because the police were interviewing him. He tells me this story. Him and his 2 friends were in the woods, shooting a .22 pistol. Friend number 3 tries to fire and it doesn't go off. Friend number 3 looks into the barrel to check the gun. The gun then goes off, firing the round in there, and then the next round, shooting him twice in the face. You read that correctly. 3 guys went into the woods with a .22 pistol, 2 walked out, and the 3rd was shot twice in the face and died. Anyone who knows anything about guns knows this is basically impossible. But since guy and friend number 2 both had the same story, and the cops had no way to prove otherwise, no charges were filed. I stopped hanging out with that guy. Forever. Really ducked up story. What do you mean by being basically impossible? I'm genuinely curious. If the pistol was semi-automatic, they usually only fire 1 bullet per pull of the trigger. It would be really hard to fire it, let go of the trigger and then squeeze it again after getting shot with the first bullet. Seems dodgy as duck. It could have been a squid load, where a bullet becomes stuck at some point along the inside of the barrel. When the next round is fired, the gases force both out. I'm not completely sure if they would follow each other through one hole, but suffice to say it's technically possible, depending on what shot twice means in that context. Nevertheless, I wouldn't have acted any differently than you did. Fuck all that. 100% correct. It's not technically impossible, but very ducking unlikely. I once asked my grandfather, "How you doing, grandpa?" And he said, "Not good, not good. I moved my bowels 3 times already today. Went to the doctors and they put a tube in my penis." Should I mention we were at a family funeral? Hey, you asked. Bet that's the last time he asked grandpa how he was doing. Greeting. Grandpa. Salutations. Biological father of one or more of my biological parents. I have homicidal intrusive thoughts. They border on impulses and I often feel like I'm being pulled towards them. I walked out on a date in the middle of a movie because I couldn't stop thinking about strangling her. To be fair, we were at a mental hospital. Well, hey, good for them for walking out and seeking treatment. I hope they got the help they need to cope with it. Let's not be too hasty. It could have been state mandated therapy. Could be. But someone who has the capacity to realize those issues and remove themselves from that situation is probably, hopefully for them, also capable of seeking help. When I was in 7th grade, there was a rumor going around that a student had been raped during a football game. She got called to the principal's office in math class. It was a collaborative class, so 4-5 people at each desk. I was like, I hope she's okay. And the girl across from me said, and I quote, "I don't know why everyone's making such a big deal about this. You can't rape black girls. Can't forget that one. I'm not even 100% sure I know what she meant by that, but my jaw still dropped. When I was 20 something back in the 90s, I was sitting on the front steps of my condo waiting for my sister's husband to pick me up. Nice old fellow, a tenant of my building, sat down next to me. His first sentence he'd ever spoken to me was, "Did you hear that they're taking my testicles off on Thursday?" I responded that I had not. He continued, "Yep. Don't use them much anymore after the missus died." Mercifully at that moment my brother-in-law drove up. For some reason this is my favorite. That's one hell of an opening chat up line. I was on a date with a girl and everything was going okay. Not amazing, but definitely still in the range of a second date. At some point, the conversation wasn't even sexual. She said that one of her favorite memories was regularly letting an older guy tie her up in the backseat and drive around, sharing her with random people off the street when she was 15. It was at that point I decided there would not be a second date. Edit. The conclusion that I bailed because I immediately viewed her as damaged goods or whatever is completely off base. There was other behavior to suggest she needed help from someone qualified to do it, and I felt that it wouldn't be healthy for either of us to pursue a relationship together. Also, it seems like there's a few predators around here that need to get the duck out. Poor girl was probably badly abused and tried rationalizing it as consent retroactively. This makes me sad. Yep. Trying to wrestle some power back into the situation by convincing herself she had liked it. That's really sad. Taxi driver was a jerk, bragging about how he had taken advantage of a drunk girl he picked up in the party zone of the city. It was the most uncomfortable taxi ride of my life. I hope you ducking reported him. I did. I hope the girl filed the complaint as well. Shame I did not have more information. Good on you. Seriously, that he bragged about it makes me think he's done it more than once, and he thinks it's normal and acceptable. Middle-aged dude here. The amount of child abuse my peers went through, how casual they are about, and that they lament the fact that they can't do it to their kids. Whoa, that last bit. I'm praying it's physical abuse and not sexual abuse, but that's really not even much better at all. What the duck? Sexual abuse is way worse than physical abuse. Absolutely, but there's something ducked up about typing golly gee. I hope that there was some physical child abuse. A neighbor told me how she was suicidal at one point and almost drove herself and her kid into a lake. Then she tried to convert me to her religion. My boyfriend and I were hanging out with an old friend of my boyfriend's and discussing how a girl we sort of knew was raped by this guy we sort of knew she was friends with. My boyfriend and I were talking about how horrified and disgusted we were, and his friend goes, "I mean, he just had sex with her while she wasn't conscious. That's not really rape. I do that to my girlfriend all of the time." We immediately told him to leave and cut off that friendship. Did you try to contact the girlfriend so she get out? She might have been into it and maybe that's why he was so blasé about the situation. I've heard of that kind of fetish thing before. If the two people in the relationship are very comfortable with each other and like the dominance aspect. I doubt I'm right, but I like this idea better. Means the dude isn't a piece of shit, just naive. Dude whipped out a picture from his suit. It was of a naked woman spread eagle on a bear rug. He said girls will do all sorts of things for a quick buck, and if interested, we could go in for a photo shoot. Never met him before or since. He was like showing me his favorite pet. English isn't my main language. Could you explain what spread eagle on a bear rug means? She was on a bearskin rug with her arms and legs spread wide. Photosynthesis. If you join the military, there's always be that one guy girl in your squad or platoon. The soldier who's about as bright as a bag of hammers, and or you'll swear their parents must be cousins or something. In my previous unit, that soldier also happened to be something of a Christian zealot with some really ducked up ideas about how the world should be. And I wish it was just as simple as thinking the earth is only 6,000 years old. That soldier was straight up ducking delusional. So what did they say during the deployment that was so scary? Killing Iraqis isn't a sin because they aren't Christians. Dear Department of Defense, please for the love of duck start administering psych edibles at MEPS. People like this do not need to be given loaded firearms and uniforms. Editing to clarify, this was not some broken old SFC with years worth of PTSD from past deployments. This was a 20-year-old private from suburban Georgia. Deleted. If the pizza guy thinks Jesus is telling him to preach at you while handing you your pizza, at worst you have a ducked up funny story. If a soldier hears Jesus telling him to shoot civilians and then he kills a bunch of heretics, at the absolute least you have a bunch of corpses you have to explain to your superiors. As a society we really need to cut down on the number of hard to explain corpses we're generating. Or maybe the people empowered to casually go around generating them. They randomly told me details about them being molested. In the middle of our first date. Was there a second date? Yep. How was it? If that's okay. I'm genuinely curious. We've been together like 18 months. The first 6 months were pretty awesome. But been going downhill since then. That her dad was a sheriff. Raped her on the regular. And she had many miscarriages because of it. I think it was our third day working together. We had a shift alone and she was a talker. Usually she spouted nonsense but she busted the above out like she was telling me how her dad taught her to ride a bike. I was speechless and kept my head down in my work while she started on another topic. I later learned she was a pathological liar but I had never really heard rape mentioned casually and it threw me off. Some people suffering from PTSD will casually talk about their trauma like that. Like to deal with it? This is part of why trauma survivors have a hard time being believed when they tell their story. I'm a mental health clinician and when I started out it was hard to reconcile my gut feeling that a person is full of shit because they appear to be so matter of fact as they relay their horrible abuse story. With the fact that very bluntly saying what happened to them without any emotion is the only way they can get it out. Detaching from the emotion of it helps get the narrative out there so it can be addressed. But a lot of times it's police officers or family members etc hearing someone seem casual as they state their story. And to them it doesn't seem believable because they think a person who's gone through something awful should be a hysterical mess as they describe it. An acquaintance in high school casually told me that she lost her virginity by being gangbanged by her uncles. It was horrific then and as an adult, it's even more horrific now. That poor ducking girl. I wanna throw up. Coach bus driver was like, sorry the bus was late guys. The traffic was caused by someone who committed suicide by walking into traffic. Looks at one of the passengers getting off the bus. You remember the blood skid marks, right? All of us who were waiting at the bus station were like WTF. Guy said it like he sees it every day or something. When you drive for a living you could see the rapture and you just get pissed at all the abandoned cars on the road. Jesus take the wheel. I was a paralegal. My boss was a landlord on the side and rented a place to a crack dealer who trashed the place on his way out. My boss was told that he needed a hazmat team to clean it. Instead he sent me and I had to provide the gloves and garbage bags. He was paying me an extra $20 a day and told me that I should be grateful because it would help with my $20,000 of collective debt. That was the moment that my self-esteem and ambition in life died. I haven't seen it since. So sorry to hear that. You prob had a good case for legal action against that pose. Guy in high school tells me he was kidnapped and buried in a box. It was in the news all summer like 14-year-old dude kidnapped and found by hunters buried in the woods. Guy shows up freshman year, it was freaking him. Being buried alive is probably the worst thing I can think of. That's horrifying. He was there for a couple of weeks. The guy would come back, rape him, feed him and leave. Hunters just stumbled onto him. This was 40 years ago. A few years ago the guy was up for parole and the guy in the box was all in the news fighting to keep him in prison. When I worked at a grocery store, some dude I worked with made a comment about how days like this really make me want to stick a bomb. He literally named a specific military type bomb in the store. I know exactly where I'd put it too. I reported him. Never heard or saw anything from him again. Bro, good for you for taking it seriously. Deleted. What are you gonna do? Blow up the store? After a week of testing when I was 14, the doctor walked in, said, "You have lupus and about 6 months." handed me a prescription for 1 month worth of prednisone and walked out. That was, incidentally, 24 years ago last month. He wasn't wrong about the lupus, but he was about the 6 months. Still, seriously ducked up thing to tell a kid like that. Jesus ducking Christ. He was an a-hole. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.